Hey, my beautiful listeners, we are back with season 3 of The Beautiful Side of Grief, and I'm your host, Helen Morris. My incredible guests continue to share their own personal stories of grief in so many different forms, and how they have managed to find the positives and beauty from their experiences. And I hope by listening to these honest, heartfelt accounts, you can find the tips, insights, resources, and strategies you need for where you are right here and now. And maybe one day even find your own beautiful side to your grief. So share away, as I would love this podcast to reach as many who need to hear it as possible. And don't forget to check out the episode notes as well for more information and links. Plus, the energy healing I do that changed my life forever. And this season, I'd love to share the affirmations and meditations I'm working on also, so stay tuned for those. Right now, though, my thanks to you for listening in, and let's check out who this week's guest is. It's easy to take life for granted, but in a blink of an eye, life can throw a curveball that completely changes everything, as many of you listening know. So losing one parent would be bad enough, but losing both within 5 years, well, that's got to be tough. But the crazy thing about Danny Goldberg, who this happened to and who is my guest today, is that just a few years on, at the age of 28, he is helping people build their dream life through sharing his wisdom on his podcast, Bits of Gold, and through his writing and speaking. Many of his early episodes on Bits of Gold, and I just love that name, it's just such a great play on words, focuses on grief and adversity, so it's well worth checking it out. Danny had successful entrepreneur written all over him. He won over 50K in business competitions in college, sold his first venture, and went on to build a 7-figure manufacturing company to help people create and scale consumer products, including the hugely popular Gravity blankets, which is one of the most successful Kickstarters to date, grossing over $4 million in just 30 days. I can't believe that. And remember, this guy is just at the tender age of 28. So we're going to take a listen to his incredible story of how he navigated his grief and adversity to be able to move forward in such a powerfully positive way. Listen up, because I'm sure he'll have plenty of gold nuggets, and yep, that pun is absolutely intended, of how you can navigate your own tough times. He will help us understand how struggle and adversity don't have to destroy or define us. In fact, it's a struggle that can make us into a much better version of ourselves. The intention I'm setting for today's episode is to understand that grief doesn't need to hold you back. It will always be a defining and incredibly important part of your journey that you can survive. Though, through the depth of experiencing it, it can also lead you to bigger and greater things, or simply greater awareness of what is important in your life. As always, I'm sending you loads of love and hugs and happiness to help you on your way today. So let's meet Danny Goldberg. Danny, you don't know how excited I am to meet with you today.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. Excited to be here.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we connected through a mutual acquaintance, David Richmond. Is that right? Who I interviewed for Cycle of Lives?
Yes. I had David on my show, Bits of Gold, a couple months back.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. He's got an incredible story, and I loved interviewing him. Such a big, huge heart he has, and what he's achieving. Mind you, epic endurance, eh? Epic.
Yeah, for real. I'm doing a half Ironman, and I called him for some advice, and it's just crazy that he's done like 17 or 18 full Ironmans.
Oh my goodness. Wow. And that Cycle of Lives itself, just under 5,000 miles cycling. Wow. And I have to say congrats to you, because you've recently become an uncle to 2 beautiful wee babies. So can you just share with us their names and that feeling of holding them both in your arms?
Yeah, Mia and Ella, and my oldest sister also had a baby recently as well, Ari. But yeah, it's definitely my family is growing in size. I've become an uncle like 3 times in a very short period of time.
It's such a special feeling too, isn't it? You know, these
Yeah,
little
absolutely.
ones in your life. Does it make you feel like you want to be a dad yourself?
Soon, soon, soon.
Okay, speaking of dads, you were just 20 heading into your senior year of college when your own dad died. And so, can you share with us a little bit of background on that and just how it came about and what those first few months were like for you? Because, you know, as a young guy, and guys typically don't do well at sharing their feelings. So, I just want to understand how you dealt with all of that and what gave you hope that life could be okay without this important figurehead in your life.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say I always had a pretty positive perspective or outlook on life. I'd say that's pretty much how I always carried myself and walked the world. But just to take it a step back, before like my dad was ever terminally ill, growing up, my childhood was a very happy childhood. I did not know any really for the most part, and there were some tragic things that happened growing up, but my aunt died at a relatively young age, and I lived through some other loss and losing grandparents, but some things that were more just like, you know, the more commonplace as a way of life, you know, a grandparent dying. My aunt I was close with, but nothing I would say that was overly tragic, relatively speaking. And really my childhood was like I didn't know any, I really didn't know like grief, hardship, adversity, as much as maybe I thought I knew about facing adversity and navigating tough circumstances. I really did not have the slightest clue. And you know, I always share this story just to sort of share my perspective at the time. My freshman year of college, I went to a really small university, and almost the day I got there, I realized that I did not actually want to go to that school, and I made this big mistake. And I quickly applied to a different school. I didn't get accepted, so I was stuck at this university. And I called my mom and I said, "Mom, this is a huge mistake. This is so unfair." And I was crying. I was so upset. And she told me, you know, this isn't unfair. This is just life. And at the time, we had a family friend who was young guy, a year older than me, diagnosed with cancer, and she said, "That's called life being unfair. This isn't unfair. This is just life throwing you something that you don't like, but you're going to be okay." And that was really like to give your listeners a sense of my perspective at that time. And I was 19 years old. That was really like the hardest thing in my life at that point. Just to give you a
Wow.
sense of like what I navigated up until that point. So I would say I really had like a fairly privileged and fortunately like a very easy, fun, happy childhood. And everything changed when really only a year later, when I did end up ultimately switching schools and I thought everything was going great. Actually, my parents, my mom and dad dropped me off at the Syracuse. I transferred there. They dropped me off. And I was like, it was a whole new beginning. And that was August. And then come November, it was parents weekend. And my dad said he didn't really feel well, but he still chose to come up. And when he came up, he looked very pale. He looked a little skinnier than he normally was. And he didn't seem to be just like, he didn't seem so energetic like his normal self. And they ended up deciding to leave early, but instead of going home, they went to the hospital. And a couple of days later, he called me and told me that he has cancer and he's going to be okay and that we're going to get through this. And at that point, really, I believed, like I wasn't able to put the two together that, oh, my dad's can die. Like it wasn't even an option in my mind. And that's kind of just to give you an idea of like how naive I
Yeah.
was around the real hardships of life.
Yeah. So how long did it take? How long was his journey with cancer?
Yeah, so my dad was diagnosed with a rare cancer, and he was from the day he was diagnosed basically till the day he passed, it was about 7 months. And I was away at school, so I would go when I was still in school, and I would speak to him, and I really believed like that it almost like he was going to get treatment and he was going to be okay. And I was definitely sheltered from the reality of the situation a little bit, and I think partially that was like his choice. But when I would come home, every time I'd come home, he'd be skinnier, weaker, and progressively it went from my dad like just getting treatment to my dad being skinnier to my dad being in a walker to my dad not being able to walk. to my dad not being able to go from like up and down the stairs to not being able to like get out of his bed to the bathroom without being completely winded. So it was pretty fast and pretty aggressive. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's like every time I'd come home from school, it was more like a holiday or something. And I would see him in these for a couple days at a time, and he would just be like kind of a different person each time.
That's a pretty fast transition, going through all those stages. So when he finally died, what was that like for you?
Yeah, so I would say so the weekend that he did pass, it was in June, and he went to the hospital because he started having like a lot of hip pain,
Yeah.
and he wasn't really able to walk at this point, and they said they were going to radiate his hip over the weekend, and hopefully like he sat me down and he said like there's not really so much more treatment that they can do to like attack the cancer, but that they're going to radiate his hip, and he said we're going to go on another family vacation, and he's going to get out of the hospital, and we're going to plan a fun trip. And he didn't really tell me how much longer he had left to live. And I was actually going away that weekend for work at the time and for a business that I was involved in. And I said, okay, this was like Friday. And I said, well, should I go or should I stay? And he said, just go. Don't worry. Nothing's going to change by the time you get back on Sunday. I'm just getting some radiation. He got the radiation Saturday, and then Sunday my mom called me early in the morning and she said you should come back to the hospital. Dad's not doing well. And when I got back later that day, he was no longer like talking or really coherent, and they upped his pain meds and he passed that night. And yeah, in that moment, like, your whole world stops. And I was in the hospital room with my dad and my mom, my aunt, and my sisters, and I just remember like collapsing on the floor, and I wasn't able to. It was very difficult to accept the situation, the reality of the situation in that moment.
Wow. So it's almost like a surreal feeling, isn't it? It's like, it's happened, but part of you doesn't want to accept it's happened. And then you're going through all these different emotions. I like it's such an unbelievable time.
Yeah,
So,
it's a bizarre feeling. I remember like from when I got to the hospital to when he actually passed, it was, I don't know, maybe 10 hours. And I remember going into the room, being in there with him for a little bit, and then going into like the waiting room and sitting there and just putting my head in my hands and like shaking my head almost because almost in like disbelief of the situation. But I think in many ways, if you haven't lost someone, or if you haven't lost someone of like, if you haven't been there when someone is dying, it's almost it's not like the movies in many ways, and it's very hard to imagine what that actual situation will be like or what it would feel like without actually having to live through it.
yes, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Because there are no words, are there? Like it's such a huge sensation overload. In the months after that, how did you manage? Did you go back to university and just throw yourself back into uni life again and into the work you were doing? Or what worked for you to try and deal with
Yeah,
this?
so it was summertime, which was like definitely nice because I was not at school, so I had the summer to be with friends and family. I would say that summer was it's I really don't have any memories from that summer, which is kind of funny, I guess, now thinking about it. Um, but I immediately started, like, I think the same week my dad passed, I started therapy for the first time, which I found extremely helpful. And actually, like, as a result of my dad passing, and I think really because it was very hard, I was very numb to the the emotions and the pain. Like a lot of the symptoms that I experienced as a result of my dad passing were physical. So like my dad had a lot of hip pain, and then I started having a lot of anxiety that I was having my own pain of not necessarily that I'm dying, but I had a lot of anxiety, a tremendous amount of anxiety around death. And that's where I would say therapy really helped. It wasn't immediate, but I would say over a long period and process of consistently speaking with someone and getting help. And I did end up going back to school in the fall. It was my last year, and kind of just like threw myself back in. It was difficult because in many ways I just wanted to be home, be with my mom, help take care of her. But I ended up finishing school, and the following summer I ended up getting involved in a nonprofit organization, Experience Camps, which is a free 1 week camp for kids, I think ages like 9 to 16, that have lost a loved one. And that's that is the that was sort of like this eye-opening moment when my own experience with death, grief, loss sort of, I would say, started to change from not necessarily a place of like a negative place, but definitely changed my perspective on life.
Yeah. And I think I understand that, because I think when you start immersing yourself with people that have gone through a myriad of different types of loss, and then you see them all together, and in amongst all that loss, you can see kids laughing, having fun, and it's almost like the two extremes. So what do you think experience camps taught you about managing grief?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much. I'm now. I think this is going to be my 10th summer involved. So I've
Hmm.
been pretty involved in the organization and have seen it like grow tremendously since my first summer. But one of the things right off the bat are just that you can hold two emotions at once. You can be, on one hand, you could be feeling an extremely deeply painful feeling of loss, sadness of, and the hurt associated with grief. But on the flip, you could, 1 second later, you could be out having the time of your life, playing catch or going for a swim or hanging out with friends. And I think that balance and learning that that's okay and that you can hold two feelings at once or two emotions at once is one of the things and one of the really beautiful sides of the organization. Because on one hand, and from in 1 hour you could be speaking about the worst thing in your life with kids that are somewhere between ages 8 to 16, and 10 minutes later you could be out having the time of your life, playing in a mud pit or going in the lake or something like that. But I would say for me, probably the biggest thing that happened that summer, the kids sort of all have an opportunity throughout the week to share their story and share their person or their people that died. And they're able to do it in different settings. Some are in smaller, just like bunk settings. And then at the end of the week, it culminates where the kids are all asked to, everyone's welcome to come light a candle. And it's sort of this big memorial. And the kids can come up at the end and share in front of the entire camp. The one that I go to in Maine is, I don't know, a couple hundred kids now. So it's the organization is like well over 1,000 kids today. And all these kids get up and they share the person or the people that died, and maybe some story about their loss and just their gratitude and how grateful they are to have stumbled into this organization and be with all these other kids and people who have lost someone who get it. And seeing that's a very surreal experience, especially from kids that are, a fraction of your age. And I ended up calling my mom at the end of the week, and she's like, "How was the week?" And I ended up telling her, wow, there was so much that I needed to tell her. But one of the big things that I told her was that I can't, I couldn't believe, I guess, how fortunate I was to have had my dad for 20 years and to have had the relationship that I had with him for those 20 years. And I really could not help but feel grateful that I was given that opportunity, because there were kids there that were much younger than me who lost a parent much younger and in their own ways. But, it just made me feel this tremendous sense of gratitude for what I did have, as opposed to looking at it like what I lost, if that makes sense.
So makes sense. That is what I felt right from the get-go with losing my daughter. I just chose to not ask why it happened, but to look on those amazing 18 years that I had with her and be grateful for those, and be grateful for everything we shared together, the good, the bad, the sometimes ugly, with girls and mums and things like that. But we had so many special, special memories that we forged together.
Yeah.
And to this day, I still live in total gratitude for her being in my life. And people go, "Yeah, but she's not here anymore." But that's not what it's about. It's just that
Yeah,
being grateful. And I think that's such a powerful emotion.
absolutely. And, it doesn't mean just going backwards to what I was discussing before with holding these two emotions at once. You know, it doesn't mean that it isn't painful or that it doesn't suck, but it does mean that, you know, you could still feel grateful, but also a tremendous feeling of loss or pain
Yes.
associated with your loss, etc.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think that we need to get better at allowing ourselves to have laughter and humor mix freely with grief? Because I think so many people feel guilty about that. They think, oh my gosh, I can't allow myself to be happy or enjoy this moment because, I've just lost
Yeah, I think
somebody. Yeah.
Yeah, I think absolutely. I think there's really no like right or wrong way to grieve, and I think especially I do think overall, you know, there's a lot of like societal norms around how you're supposed to grieve or what you're supposed to feel, but you know, I think you need to do whatever you're feeling in the moment. Or I think it was interesting when my mom passed, and we can get to that in a minute here, but
Yeah.
when she passed, it was almost like, so I'm in the Jewish religion, you do like Shiva, which is a 7 days of grieving, and people come to your house, and they come to your house. I just know the siren. Is that okay?
It's okay. It's life happening. So we'll
Okay,
just deal
it's
with
like
that.
I live in Manhattan, and sometimes it's completely silent, and other times it's going off like crazy. But yeah, so with in the Jewish religion, with Shiva, you do it for 7 days, and people come to your house, and you know they come to support you. Some people bring you food. And for my mom's, it really was almost like it wasn't a party, but you know, people were coming, and it was almost like a celebration of her life, even though it was such a tragedy. You know, like the overall feeling or the spirit of the people in the house together was, there was something like, you know, and it was funny. I mean, even looking back, because I think maybe some of my friends that came were like, "This is this a party, or is this a grieving? Is this someone grieving right now?" But the overall like spirit in the house, or the energy in the house, was just really like there was tremendous hurt and pain, but there was something beautiful of everyone coming together and being there with one another, whether it be my mom's closest friends or my immediate family, or you know, people that were my mom's friends that I didn't know, and things like that. But I definitely don't think that, like, you know, because you lost someone, you have to always feel sad or something like that.
Yeah, that's so important to recognize and that. And so your mum also died of a rare cancer, didn't she? Gosh,
Yeah.
talk about
So,
double whammy.
yeah. Well, yeah, absolutely. It's still crazy kind of to this day, because I don't come from like a family with a history of cancer. Actually, like prior to my parents both being diagnosed with cancer, no one like in my immediate family or grandparents or great grandparents like had cancer. So it was really out of left field and completely foreign. And the cancers were unrelated. My mom was diagnosed when I was about a month before my 25th birthday, and her cancer was actually even more rare and more aggressive. From the
Oh,
day that she was diagnosed, or from really the day she checked into the hospital, she didn't leave the hospital because they had a very difficult time diagnosing her cancer. And
mhm.
she was in the hospital for 2 months and died basically 2 months from the day she checked into the hospital, and never left. So she was in the hospital for the entirety of the
Wow.
2 months.
Oh, that's fast. That almost is so fast. How do you get your head around it so quickly? But I guess again, it's being grateful to at least have some time as opposed to maybe somebody who doesn't get that chance, who loses them in an accident. So yeah, weighing it up. Oh my
Yeah, and
gosh.
you know, it's definitely like, I remember looking back thinking, but before my mom ever was diagnosed or sick or anything like that, I remember saying, "Oh, my dad was sick for 7 months. That's such a short period of time." And then my mom was only sick for 2 and passed away. So you know, perspectives, everything. And but yeah, it was a very completely different experience. I would say when my dad was diagnosed and sick, I had very little idea that he was going to die. With my
Yeah.
mom, I was very hopeful, but also I was much more grounded with like the reality of the situation, and that she had such a rare cancer, and that they didn't really know how to treat it. And I just knew that like the best case scenario was that she was still going to die. I just didn't know if it was going to be like a year, or maybe a couple of years, or you know, a couple of months.
So, did that give you the opportunity, do you think, to really have some deep, good conversations with your mum?
You know, I want to say like I wish we did speak about more things, but I would say like for my mom, I was very hopeful. Maybe
Yeah.
like behind the closed doors when I wasn't with her, I was more realistic with my tempering my own expectations. But I think with my mom, I really tried to hold out and be hopeful for her, but
Yes.
not really be hopeful for myself, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
My
Total
mom
sense.
had it was really like a very torturous battle with cancer, because when she checked into the hospital, they didn't know what type of cancer it was. They were not they could not basically get it. They could not figure it out, really. And she ended up transferring hospitals because they thought she had a different type of cancer, and then they realized it's not that type of cancer, so they sent her back to the other hospital. And in the other hospital, she ended up going through like 3 major invasive surgeries, and they said, we don't
Wow.
know if you're going to survive the surgery, but we need to do this if you want to stay alive, basically. So she did all that, and then she finally made it to 1 chemo round, but it was not she was yelling in pain, and it was a terrible
Oh,
day. So, and then she only passed, really, like from the time she had chemo to the time she passed, I think it was only a couple weeks. So it was a very different experience. But I would say, like, at the end, once they said, okay, we're not doing any more treatments or anything like that, that is when I went into the room and I was able to, tell her the things that I wanted to tell her and express like my love and gratitude for her. And actually, I would say in this instance, and I know you're asking about some of the mindsets or where I was at with my dad, but with my mom, I would say I was in a very dark place. Like, I would say really for like the first time in my life, I felt depression. And I remember not necessarily like feeling like I didn't want to be alive, but feeling like there just wasn't a point to life. And like, I remember I went to go and see a friend, and he just was going to listen. Wasn't going to share his perspective or anything. And I was just going to like vent to him. And it was like it would almost look like it looks today. It was like a beautiful day outside, and the sun was like beaming down on me. But I remember really feeling gray. Like, everything was gray. Outside was gray. The sun felt gray. And I really felt like depressed. And once my mom moved into like hospice care, I told her life's so unfair. And I told her, like, we already had dads taken from us so young. Now you. And she said, life is unfair, but there's so much to be grateful for. And she said, life's also so glorious. And it was sort of like in this last conversation that I had with her where she really shifted my mindset from, oh, life's so unfair, there's no point, etc., to shifting it to like find the glory in your life. And like, almost it wasn't, like, obviously you don't have a choice, you can't change the circumstances, but it was really in that moment where like I accepted this situation absolutely sucks, but I'm going to go out and continue on with my life and find happiness again and rebuild my life. And that's somewhat, I would always say with grief, like, it's almost like you're destroyed
yeah.
and you sort of have this opportunity to like rebuild your life, and you're more calloused as a result, right? Like, you have you have a lot more pain that you're building off of, but you become a little bit more unbreakable, and your perspective and your views are morphed, and you build yourself into a new person, assuming you're able to pick yourself up and not move on, but move forward.
I always have that image of the phoenix rising from the ashes because you're totally crushed,
Yeah.
and then you start rebuilding yourself. How is this life going to look for me? And sometimes you don't know how it's going to look, but you just keep taking one step, one step, one step. Tell us about the special relationship you had with a lady called Barbara Settle. Have I said her name correct?
Yeah.
And
I
how
guess
she gave you hope.
even just before we
Yeah.
get to that, I would say a lot of also like very unique unique things happened with my mom in the hospital. Just like, so my oldest sister, actually, she was engaged at the time, but once we knew my mom was going into hospice care, my oldest sister, my mom said her last wish is to see her daughter get married. So it became like we had like a full blown wedding in the hospital, and it wasn't just like small and in the room. We ended up using like the guest waiting area in the hospital, and my mom's closest friends came in and they put like makeup on her, and there was a pianist that came in actually and like played music, and it was almost like a full blown wedding that took place in the hospital. And everyone kept coming up to us after, and they're like, people have gotten married in the hospital before, but never like this, never to this degree. And this was like really days before my mom passed, and I would say it's a very bizarre, going back to holding those two emotions. It's like, on one hand, my sister's getting married and this is supposed to be the happiest day of her life, and on the other hand, this is one of my mom's last days of her life. So it's a very bizarre feeling to be holding those two things at once.
Yeah.
But it does make you, like that alone just gives you such a perspective on, it's like, on one hand, my sister's starting this new phase of her life, and on one hand, like my mom's life as we knew it is ending. So it's just very bizarre to hold those two things and to actually live through and see those things take shape and take place.
One thing I want to share that the listeners can't see is that as you were speaking about that, you were glowing, you were smiling, your eyes were sparkling, and such a special memory, but tempered with such a sad fact that, yeah, those were your mum's last few days. But you can still speak about it with such joy in your voice and in your face. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, there's something beautiful to what took place. Really, it was like it could have been out of a movie, or easily, like you can't make it up, but it was just one of those things that are just like, so it's very bizarre. And I'm 28, so I'm sort of in like the time period where lots of people are getting married and things like that. And it is very funny to hear people talk or complain about like their own weddings and things like that. It's like, I would always have my sister in the back of my mind, because it's like, she got married in a hospital with my mom dying days after, knowing she's going to die. It's just, yeah, it just gives you an incredible perspective on like what really matters in life.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start talking about that, because you've managed to pivot yourself into this incredibly positive way of thinking and dealing with life and moving forward in that. So I really want to understand, what were some of the key things that happened or that you discovered along the way that helped you get to that incredible space?
Yeah. I would say it's not like one thing happened in particular that really, I would say that the conversation with my mom definitely like fundamentally changed like my outlook and perspective immediately in the moment. But there's no shortcut to grief and to navigating grief. There's no timeline, you have to do it on your own terms and in your own time. And I think really in many ways, individually, however you have to grieve is how you'll grieve. I have two sisters, and I feel like we all experience the same thing, but we've all navigated life after on our own terms and in our own individual way. And, we're all doing okay today, but we've handled the losses, I would say, differently, just in regards to how we carried on or moved forward as a result. But I would say, really, and you sort of alluded to it or mentioned it sort of at the beginning of the show, but I would say fairly quickly after my mom died, I took on the mentality that the why isn't an important question to ask. And it's okay to ask why. And it's okay to sit and think about the whys, but eventually you have to just say what. And to me, that was what I'm going to do now as a result of the circumstances that I've lived through. So, I really tried hard to not focus on all the whys, but really focus on that what. And that definitely helped me move forward. And I definitely would say like immediately following my mom's loss, it really was the thing that woke me up to be very intentional and to recognize that there is no guarantee that tomorrow is ours, that and I think when my dad died, it sort of made me well aware that we're not here forever and that life is fragile and that we should, you have to navigate your life knowing that you're not here forever. But it's almost like when my mom died, it was reinforced and almost like it's engraved in me now, where like I wake up every single day and the first thing that I really feel is tremendous amount of gratitude for my health. I have like a little gratitude journal and every day I write in it, and every day the first thing I write is exactly the same. And it's my health and then the health of the others that are closest to me, because it really is such a blessing or such a miracle when you wake up and you're not having to worry about, your blood count, your your white blood cells, your red blood cells,
Yes.
how the tests come back. When you wake up and you don't, when you're not stressed about that, it is in many ways like a luxury in and of itself.
And from my perspective, like just practicing that whole entire art of gratitude is that it makes me realize, the simplest things around me to be grateful for, because there are so many others who are going through tremendous hardship and trials and don't have access to the same thing. So it's easy to get off, derail yourself and just feel sorry for yourself. But once you start your day with gratitude, I think it puts you in the right frame of mind to carry on in a positive way and really look at life through the lens of I've got this here and now, let's make the most of it.
Yeah. When like I mentioned like my sister getting married in the hospital, but there were all these little things that happened
Yeah.
while my mom was dying that started to shift my perspective from like life's so unfair and this is so messed up to I'm lucky, I'm gonna be okay. I remember one day I was leaving the hospital, and my routine for those 2 months was like I would wake up, go to the hospital, spend time in the hospital, go home, do it all over, and that was really my day for like the entirety of the 2 months that my mom was alive in the hospital. And one day I was leaving, and as I walked into the elevator, there was this little girl who was probably, I don't know, 8 years old, and she came in. She didn't have any hair, and she was holding an IV drip that was attached to her arm, and she was with her parents. And I didn't speak to her. Don't know what was wrong with her. Don't know how things turned out for her, but I was with my cousin in the elevator, and the little girl ended up leaving, and I just turned to my cousin and I said, "Wow, like I have it so like even though my mom's dying upstairs, I have it so good because that could have been
Yeah.
my life, that could have been your life, that could have been my
Yeah.
mom's life. Like
Yeah.
I'm lucky." And that was sort of, in many ways it was little things like that started happening where I started to just wake up and count my blessings as opposed to, looking at all the bad things that had happened.
Yeah. Why is it so important for you to help people build their dream lives now?
Yeah, well, I think through the experience of loss and losing my mom and dad at a young age, I really harness and carry this perspective around time and certainly understand that we're not here forever. And I think most everyone knows that like there's two guarantees in life. You can be once you're born that you're gonna die eventually. But I think most people, or a lot of people I should say, I think just sort of like go where the wind blows, and they live their life and they wake up one day, and whether they're happy with their life or not happy with their life, they say like this is just my life. And I really believe that everyone has the ability to commit to the life they want and they should, I really like deep down believe that everyone should go out and chase whatever it is, whether it be a hobby, a career, a life of travel, whatever that life looks like for them, that they should go out and pursue it, because tomorrow is just not guaranteed. I always say,
Yeah.
each day's a gift, not a guarantee. And I really deep down just so wholly, I believe that. I lived it in losing both my parents, and knowing that, it's just like, don't waste your time. It's so precious.
So that's what you mean by becoming time wealthy?
Yeah, so time wealthy is actually a buddy of mine, Sunil Arora, who I've had on my show a bunch of times. I don't know if he created the term or if he got it from somewhere else, but he always says, become the best wealth that you can be is time wealthy. And what that means to me, at least, is harnessing the time that you do have, being extremely intentional about the time that you do have, where you're waking up, spending the time exactly as you please, doing the things you want with who you want, when you want. That's becoming time wealthy, where you sort of take life into your own hands. And, there's obviously degrees to being able to do that or seeing that through. But that is what I mean by becoming time wealthy. And I really do think that is like a great goal for most people, to harness, to own, to take ownership of your own time.
Yes. I know, because that was probably one of the defining things that I learned from losing my child, was like, the ball is in your court. You can be whoever you want to be. Just go out and be brave enough to be that person.
Yeah, I love that. It's sort of, it's funny when you think about like fear, whatever it may be, whether it be like fear of asking someone out, or fear of starting a business, or fear of pursuing your dreams, whatever it may be. It's just like, so, like there really is not so much to fear, because in many ways, I know there's like that famous Steve Jobs quote, but in many ways you really don't have anything to lose at the end of the day.
No, absolutely not. And even if you fail, I mean, what is failure for a start? But even if you didn't quite achieve what you wanted to achieve, the fact is you probably learned a lot in the process, and that knowledge and that experience and that is wealth.
Yeah.
That's how you have to look at it. Yeah.
I would say I think if you become time wealthy, where you're very intentional about how you're spending your time, the end result is that you are happier.
Yes.
But I think like I for a long time, I would tell myself and I would tell others, like, you need to put your own happiness first, whether it means making less money, whether it means changing some things up in your life, like whatever that means to you. I think like fundamentally, a lot of people understand things that they could be doing to make their own self happier. And I think like as a baseline, that is just a very good practice to set, where you sit down maybe in a room by yourself and you write down on a piece of paper, how can I be happy? How can I be happier? Whether you've lived through loss or not, and you write a list of those things and you commit to start doing those things, and you'll see as a result that you will be happier, because those are you're starting to really harness your time and be intentional with it, doing the things that make you happy.
I also believe that what you are yourself is what you attract. So
absolutely.
You can't attract healthy relationships if you're dysfunctional in relationships yourself. You can't attract just so many different things. It doesn't matter what word you put in there. I think that when you become it yourself, that is when you also attract it to you.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm a great believer in self-love and being able to look in the mirror and totally love the person you are, with all your faults, all the traits that you don't particularly like about yourself. When you actually love 100% who you are, and you can look at yourself and smile from the inside out, you've got it. You've made it there. Yeah. You stop worrying about what other people think. You stop worrying about the smaller things in life that can trip you up. Let's go back, because I really do want to just quickly discuss somebody who made a big impact in your life, especially early on in your dad's grief, which was Barbara Settle, and like the hope she gave you. So tell us about that.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so Barbara was someone that I met while attending Syracuse, and she took an interest to me. After my dad died, she had reached out. She was like head of alumni relations. So she was like an older woman and just took an interest in my life, and she very much supported me as it relates to all things like entrepreneurship while I was in college. And she herself had lost her dad growing up and lost her husband later on in life. And she was really there for me after my dad had passed while in the university. I feel like she almost was like she sort of had my back, without checking in every day or things like that, and definitely made for a very unique college experience. But after college, I was very involved in experience camps, and I was able to actually. She was this older woman, not exactly fit to like be a volunteer based on like who normally volunteers as a counselor at the camp. And I was like, oh, you need to come to camp. You'll be a great volunteer. You'll be a great volunteer. And eventually she actually made her way to experience camps and fortunately was able to volunteer for a summer. And, that's just like awesome to see because it's this woman who I was very close with, who always had my back. And I felt like she was so happy that she was able to attend this organization, go there for the 5 days and give back and share her own perspective and just be there really though for the kids more than anything. She ended up passing away this past year, and I didn't speak to her for like just because of COVID. We sort of like lost touch. She's still upstate. I'm in Manhattan, but I didn't know that she was sick, but really just like kind of took me by surprise. And that's like I would say her loss just sort of was just like another wake up call just in regards to just that, we're not your relationships are just like so precious, and just really a reminder of how fragile life is. Like we didn't speak for a couple of months, and I had no idea that she was sick, and just took me by surprise.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic that you had somebody as a mentor and to give you that hope, like to make you feel like everything was going to be okay, that there was someone there that had your back. So
Absolutely.
Special. Now, just before we finish up, there's also something that you recently posted, which is like most of the time you think you have a problem, you actually have an inconvenience, and perspective is truly everything. That is such a piece of gold because you're right. It's all about perspective, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think I overheard someone saying that once, but I think it's really true. Most of the time when you think you have a problem, it really truly is an inconvenience. And I know I mentioned this before, but like I start every single day with my gratitude journal, and I write just a list of things that I'm grateful for, and health is always the first thing that I put on the list. Almost, I would say 99.9% of the time. And you see it when you are by someone's side watching them die, how how our health is really taken for granted, one. But like when you wake up and I don't know whatever I had to do today, or whatever I was running around and chasing my own tail today and running around like crazy, whatever I dealt with today, it really was just like an inconvenience. The hardship, the friction points, the frustration. Today I was in the car for a little bit. There was a lot of traffic. Like
Yes.
inconvenience. When you wake up and you have a terminal illness, or you have something wrong and you're not the future is unknown as it relates to your health, or if tomorrow you're going to be healthy or 2 weeks or a month, that's when you have a problem on your hands. And I think that I just like that statement because it really is, it puts things into perspective. And I think perspective is just so important in living your life.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of our gold nuggets. Takeaways. Okay, now to share one special memory you have of your dad and then another of your mum, because I think these are so important for those we love and the best possible light.
Yeah, I would say what comes to mind immediately in this moment. Just the other day, I opened up I went to my sister's, and she had some home cooked food from her mother-in-law, and I just got like I was instantly transported to being in my kitchen and eating one of my mom's home cooked meals, and just kind of like shooting the breeze with her in the house and talking with her. And, that's like an immediate memory that comes to mind. And with my dad, I have a memory of just sitting in the hot tub with him in like my childhood home. And also just like, shooting the breeze, just talking. I think, I think sometimes like some of my, when I start to feel sad about my loss or feel sad about the losses, and I start to think of memories, it's more like, it's never just like it's typically never just like a pinpoint experience or moment. It's more just like missing them in a moment, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I get that. I understand that. Okay. So what's the best thing that's happened to you today?
The best thing that's happened to me today. I woke up and I'm healthy.
Yes. I love that. What is your proudest moment to date?
My proudest moment to date. I'm a pretty happy guy. I would say marrying my wife.
Wonderful. When you have moments in your day that are looking a little bit dark or not going the way you want them to, or as we've got an expression here, when your day turns to custard, what do you do to pivot out of it?
Maybe work out, get outside and work out.
Yeah.
Change my environment. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So let's finish up with the takeaways that you'd like to leave with our listeners today.
Yeah. So these are my 3 takeaways, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So I would say, and this might be a little bit repetitive because I definitely feel like we probably touched on some of them, but when you are faced with adversity, when bad things happen to you, because bad things are inevitable in your life, you can ask why. There's nothing wrong with asking why, but eventually you need to ask yourself, what are you going to do now as a result of the circumstances that you're put in? I would say number 2 is to harness your most valuable asset, which is time. Without a doubt, time. Recognize that, each day is a gift and not a guarantee, and take ownership of that. Knowing that you too are going to die, how do you want to spend the limited time that you have on this earth? I always say that you don't know how much time you have on this earth. You can't control it. The only thing you can control is how and where you spend the limited time on earth that you're given. And I think if you can really be intentional with your time, you will live and be happier. And I think happiness is the end result of focusing on how you want to be spending your time. And, I would say overall, just commit to building the life that you want, knowing that you too are going to die. Really commit to getting out in the world and pursuing your dreams, whatever they may be. If they're grand, awesome. If they're small and they're not so crazy, you can live your dream life every single day. And I really, really believe that. So get out there and build your dream life.
Yeah, those are great takeaways. And don't wait for tomorrow.
Absolutely.
Make it happen today because you may not have tomorrow. Yeah. So anybody wanting to get hold of you, how can they reach you?
Yeah, I would say the easiest place is just go to bitsofgold.co.
And then from there, they can find you everywhere else. That sounds great. And of course, we'll have all that information, all those links and bits and pieces, bits of gold in the episode notes. Sorry, couldn't resist that. Oh, Danny, I just want to say what an absolute pleasure it has been having this chat with you today, to share your story, to share with us what that was like for you, how you moved through it, and where you are today and what you're making of your life today.
Appreciate that. I love what you're building with the show and the message that you're trying to share with the world and are sharing with the world, and excited to get this message out into the world as well.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Thanks for listening. I hope you got some real value from this episode. Let me know how I'm doing, or if there's a topic you'd like covered, by clicking on the Healing to Be You Gmail link or going to the Healing to Be You website. To get notified of new episodes, hit the subscribe button, and please share if you know of someone who could benefit from this episode. Until next time, be kind to you and take good care.